trivia night, and we'd love to see y'all there. It'll be a good time if you like Star Wars, especially, but also if you don't and you just want to hang out and have community with people and be like, I don't know. Oh, John, there we go. He was hiding the Mandalorian this whole time. He's been here the whole time. Emily looks like she's waiting to say something. Ooh. Amazing. So you better come see Ferris's hard work, including gluten-free options. So that's happening. If you have children and you don't want to spend time with them, just kidding. Uh, bring them back to the child care area at 4:30 or anytime between 4:30 and 5 to drop them off. And Ferris will be back there with help to take care of our kiddos. So that's tonight, May 4th. If you know Marty Solomon, or you have known Marty Solomon, or you're just a Bama stan, he'll be at my house on Monday, the 12th of May. Please let me know if you want to come and hang out to spend some time with him, because I'm making dinner. So that's going to be at like 6 or 6:30. I'll put it in the Slack. Make a little graphic. That'll be a good time. And again, if you don't know who Marty Solomon is and you don't care, but you like dinner and you like hanging out with people, then you should also come. That's totally fine. He won't be like giving a talk. He'll just be there, looming. And so that will be on Monday, May 12th. Come to my house. Also, if you don't know where I live, that will also be in the Slack. So if you're not on the Slack and you're interested in any of these things, this is the time to talk to probably Emily or Tyler, Emily or Tyler, about getting added to the Slack so that you can keep track of those exciting things we have on our agenda. But where are we? Where are we? Both in life, existentially, but also as a church. Easter just happened. It is Eastertide, as John told us, which is just a church calendar period of time before Pentecost, but after Easter is called Eastertide. So what we're doing in this particular time is we are talking about Jesus. That's always nice. We're going back to Isaiah, you guys. No. We're doing Jesus's appearances before he ascended back into heaven. How and what did it look like when he met with people before he ascended back into heaven? What were the things that he wanted this early church, this little scrappy group of people, to know? Can we find any resonance with them, with these people, as we hopefully also encounter God in mysterious ways in our lives? Can we find any resonance? So if you want to read along in the Slack, that's excellent. If you don't and you just want to listen, that's fine too. But if you have your own Bible app or whatever, or actual physical Bible, and you want to read, we are in Luke 24, and I will be stopping us plenty as we go along, as is normal. But starting in Luke 24, verse 13, it says this: "And behold, on that same day, two of them were traveling to a village named Emmaus, or Hamat in Hebrew, to a village 60 stadia distant from Jerusalem." So it says on that same day. What's the same day? This is Easter morning. So if you hung out with us at Easter, this very morning, all of the stuff happened. We journeyed with the women to the empty tomb. We hung out with them. Lectio Divina was a good time. Experienced that with them. So that was this morning. This is later that day, probably the afternoon. Where are they going? Hamat is a place in the West Bank. It means heat or hot spring. So maybe they're going, it's like a 2.5-hour hike from Jerusalem to Hamat. And so maybe they're going for a little spa day. Maybe they're just going for some hashtag self-care. That sounds nice. But there's also potentially something else going on. There are other places in the text where Hamat shows up, where this Emmaus village is present. And so I'm going to invite us to read along with me. That's in 2 Samuel 8:10. And at first it's not going to make sense, but it will. So 2 Samuel chapter 8, verse 10. When Toi, king of Hamat, heard that David had defeated all the forces of Hadadezer, he sent his son Joram to ask for peace and to bless him that defeated Hadadezer. With him in his hand were clinking things of silver and gold and bronze. These also the king David set apart for Yahweh, with the silver and the gold that was set apart from all the nations that he had tread down. If you don't feel that enlightened, it doesn't feel that insightful, stay with me here, because Tanakh loves to use name meanings that we just transliterate and we leave untranslated. And it's like leaving the steak on the table and just eating the chimichurri or the A1 sauce or whatever and ignoring the good part. So let's put those names in there of what they actually mean. When the wanderer, the king of Hamat, Emmaus or the hot spring, heard that David, whose name means love, had defeated all the forces of Hadadezer. Hadadezer means helped by a storm god, i.e. Baal or Jupiter or Zeus. He sent his son Joram, which means Yahweh is lifted up, to ask from him for peace and to bless him that defeated Hadadezer. With him in his hand were clinking things of silver and gold and bronze. These also the king David love set apart for Yahweh. So what's the point? Emmaus or Hamat is this place that after King David had finally pushed back the darkness, pushed back their enemies, pushed back the people who are opposing God's people and what they were trying to do in the land, after he had finally finished fighting his battles, Emmaus or Hamat was this place that recognized his victory and honored him with all of these things that then were set apart for God. So why are these two disciples, instead of huddling up with all of their friends who are still waiting in the upper room, being like, where's Jesus? He was stolen from the tomb. What's happening? What's going on? These two disciples sat out on a hike, just perhaps because maybe they're nerds, maybe they know their text, they know what's going on in the story, and they're like, maybe if Jesus really hasn't been taken captive by Rome, i.e. Zeus, right, Jupiter, Baal, the storm god that stands with Rome for Rome, maybe if he has defeated all of his enemies, actually in some mysterious way, maybe we should go to the spot that is connected with that point in King David's life, right? The king of love, i.e. Jesus, is life. And so just maybe that's why they're going out on a hike, just the two of them, 2.5 hours away from all of their friends. And why is that exciting and beautiful? Because Jesus, when we think of the story about where would he have like shown up post-resurrection, very exciting. Jesus has risen from the dead. If we were American writers writing like the Rambo Jesus that he sometimes imagined to be, he would have immediately gone to the Sanhedrin, right? And been like, oh, what up? What now? You tried to keep me down and you couldn't, right? Or he would have gone to Pilate and Herod and been like, are you going to try to kill me a second time? Right? Started shooting in the air and been like, what about my rights? That would have been the American Jesus. And you don't see him do that. Where does he show up? But with these people who are nerds, who are in the Bible, who are trying to figure out what's going on, and they're not quite sure, and they're not quite confident, but there he is with people who are leaning on the edge of hope. Maybe this is happening. Maybe this is true. So what happens next? Back to Luke 24. It happened as they were conversing and discussing, Jesus also approached and began to go along with them. But their eyes were prevented from recognizing him. And he said to them, what are these matters that you are discussing with one another as you are walking along? And they stood still, looking sad. One named Cleophas answered and said, are you the only one living near Jerusalem and not knowing the things that happened in these days? And he said, what things? So first off, let's not miss the dramatic irony, the comedy that's happening here. They're having this in-depth Bible study. They're arguing about like King David and what's really going on. They're trying to figure it all out. And their Bible study gets crashed by Jesus. That's pretty entertaining. He says, what things? That's just one word in Greek, poia. It's very like turtle from Kung Fu Panda. Very like, what? I haven't heard anything. Tell me more. A note about Cleophas here is we've often seen in our storybook Bibles these two disciples rendered as dudes. However, Cleophas is the last name of one of the Marys that was at the tomb earlier. We read her name, Mary Cleophas, in John 19. And so is it just another person with that name? Possibly, or possibly it is one of the female disciples of Jesus who went to the tomb, who everybody else is gathered together and discussing, and she chooses to go on. No matter who they are, we love their sass. Are you the only one who hasn't heard? Are you dumb? What's wrong with you? There's a lot going on. Thirdly, and pretty importantly, why is Jesus disguising himself? If we take off of our lullaby effect ears from having heard this passage preached before, this is kind of weird. Why is Jesus casting disguise self? Why this happened before with Miriam the Migdal, with Mary Magdalene. She sees him as a gardener, and then he does like a dramatic reveal. Does Jesus just have a great sense for the dramatic? Possibly. However, this is also a common trope in Greco-Roman literature. So if you read contemporary literature from the time, Athena is always disguising herself as a shepherd when she shows up. Venus, just in Virgil's Aeneid, disguises herself as a huntress from Africa. We see Dionysus disguise himself as a priest. Why do they do that? One, it's fun in a literary, dramatic way, but also because it's a test, right? The God is testing, who are you when you don't know it's me? Are you still going to be in your values? Are you still going to be in your character? It's like the old woman at the beginning of the Beauty and the Beast, and she's like, oh, I need help. And then she's not helped, and she turns out to be a hot enchantress who's very angry. It's that thing. It's that trope playing out. But could Jesus be doing something other than putting them through a test to see what they really think, etc.? Or could he be doing something else? Could he be training his disciples? The first person he appears to, right, is Miriam. The second person as a gardener. The second person is these two. Could he be training us in the skill, the practice of being able to recognize Jesus's face, Jesus's presence in the face of another, specifically in the face of a gardener, of a stranger, of somebody walking on the roadway? Is there an invitation in this practice of Jesus, not just because he likes to go, ha, it's me all along, that he wants us to be able to discern his presence in the people that we're traveling with, whether that's our roommate or our spouse or the immigrant or anyone else that we run into in our daily life? Possibly. Let's keep reading. They said to him, the things concerning Jesus, Yeshua of Nazareth. He was a man, a prophet, powerful in deed and word before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers surrendered him to the judgment of death. They crucified him. We, however, were hoping that it is he who is about to ransom Israel. But also, indeed, with all these things, this is the third day since it took place. But also some women from amongst us astounded us. They went early to the tomb and did not find his body. They came declaring that they saw a vision of angels who said, he is alive. Some of us went to the tomb and found it, as the women had said, but they did not see what they saw. Great little narrative retelling, very concise, very accurate, right? Jesus was a prophet. He did things that amazed everyone. He taught things that amazed everyone. He got murdered. Women went to the tomb, saw some angels. Check. What part is the part that stands out that I just skipped in that summary? This particular line, we, however, were hoping that it is he who is about to ransom Yisrael. We have past and present and future in that statement. We have hope, we have belief and unbelief, right? We were hoping that this would be true, that he is about to do this thing. And so often in belief and unbelief, we think of it as like a box to be checked about either you think the whole thing is hooey and it's just garbage and should be thrown out, or I'm all in on everything and I have no questions, I have no doubts, everything's squared away with me. I check the box that says this and this and this and this as I go down the Apostles' Creed. No problems. That's belief, and this is unbelief. Within these folks on the road, on this hike together, on their way to the hot spring, we see that it's not that it's a spectrum. They were hoping that this is about to happen. There's room for us to engage like these disciples were doing with, I used to think this, and I was super sure that this was the case, but now something terrible has happened, maybe to me, maybe to somebody else, but some part of my story, something along the way makes me feel like it's a lot harder to check that box than it used to be. And yet, there's still a part of me that wonders, maybe this part is still true. Maybe this part is still something that feels life-giving and feels right and feels essential to who I am, but I'm not sure. That's the place that these two people are in. And these are the people that Jesus wants to spend time with after he shows up, instead of just prancing around before the Sanhedrin and Pilate like we would expect him to do. Can we find ourselves in this posture, identify with these folks this morning, and then expect just maybe that Jesus is as stoked to hang out with us as he is with these people in this story? What does he say? Because again, if I were writing this story, especially with my biases, I would be like, and then Jesus gave them big hugs and said, wow, I see you and I hear you. That's not what he does. He says, Jesus said to them, oh, thoughtless and slow of heart to believe in all that the prophets have spoken. Jesus isn't afraid to mess with these people. Excuse me, they're very thoughtful, right? They're deep in 2 Samuel. They're on their way to just check out, hey, where did Jesus go? Maybe it's here. This thing happened in the story. I mean, we could just go and spend time together. It would be great. Jesus is not afraid about hurting their feelings. He doesn't just troll them and then leave, right? He doesn't just make fun of them and then disappear. He keeps having a conversation, but he's a playful person, right? He has playful kind of trickster deity energy here. What does he continue to say? He says, was it not necessary that the Messiah suffer these things and enter into glory? That's his response. They say, we don't know whether this really happened. We don't know what to believe. We were hoping that this would happen. And he says, oh, come on, don't you know? It's necessary that Messiah suffer these things and enter into his glory. There's extra fun here. Cleo, as in Cleophas, means glory. So in the little thing that he's saying to them, he's drawing their identity into the conversation. Very God thing to do, right? If you were talking to somebody and they suddenly brought up something that has to do with like the meaning of your name, it might be harder for us to catch in our American culture, which doesn't put as much gravity into symbolism, but still there might be something that catches your ear about that. He continues to say, beginning from Moshe and from the prophets, he interpreted to them the things concerning himself in all the scripture. They drew near to the village where they were going, and he acted as though he was going further. They urged him strongly, saying, stay with us. It's getting toward evening, and by this time the day is far spent. So he went in to stay with them. So he trots them through the best study Bible, the best Bama podcast, the best Bible Project video, whatever, of all time on their 2.5-hour walk. And if we go back to our Greco-Roman literature, this is their test, right? He shows up, he's kind of rude, what things, and then makes fun of them for being thoughtless. I don't know about you all, but if someone like critiqued my idea about what was happening in the Bible, I wouldn't be like, you should come over for dinner. Like, yes, you and the YouTube comments, we should hang out. But that's what they do. Maybe it's because they have this built-in value of hospitality and generosity and inviting people in off of the road. And that's beautiful. And that's what Jesus is calling out of them through this quote unquote test. And maybe it's that they are so compelled by the things that he's saying maybe that's true. They have the door open in the midst of their grief, in the midst of the heaviness and weightiness of the tragedy of, I don't know what I believe anymore. They still have the door open enough of a maybe yes to then want that person to come in. Because sometimes we hear something that feels life-giving and we're like, yeah, I don't know, I'll think about that later. Bye. It's too much, it's too heavy, it's too hard. And you send that person along their way and you don't want to lean into that. So either way, Jesus meets them in that place, and that's what's in them: openness to hope, openness to the possibility of belief, or just good old hospitality, good old generosity. Jesus says yes to that kind of faithfulness. Jesus's priority list, again, post resurrection, is going on hikes with people and having dinner with people, not proving the powerful wrong. There's something in us that thinks that that's what's the good part of the end of the story, is being able to go to that pastor or that politician or that parent and be like, ha ha, I was right, I told you all along. Jesus isn't interested in that. He's interested in having dinner with new friends and having conversations about the text. May it be so with us as well. So, what happens at the dinner? It happened that when he reclined at the table with them, he took the bread and gave thanks. After breaking it, he gave it to them. Their eyes were opened and they recognized him, and he became invisible to them. Very iconic Jesus' style. Poof. They said to one another, were not our hearts burning within us while he was speaking with us on the road, while he was explaining the scripture to us? They got up that same hour and returned to Jerusalem and found the 11 and those with them assembled, saying, the Lord has really been raised and appeared to Simon. They began describing what happened on the road and how he was recognized by them in the breaking of the bread. Last little notes before we get to our takeaways. Who here is Simon, right? They say Simon the Lord appeared to Simon. It's probably the other disciple. It could just be another guy whose name is Simon. It could be that this is Simon Peter, that he came, he ran to the tomb, he found it empty, he came back, he grabbed one of the Marys who saw the angels, and they went off on the road trip together. Why isn't Cleophas mentioned here? Probably, in my personal opinion, because she could be a woman. Her witness isn't as important in this space. That does not yet, despite Jesus pushing back against it by having Miriam the Migdal be the one who teaches the disciples about Jesus' resurrection, she is still not a trusted voice in their culture. And so it kind of makes sense that Cleophas would be a woman if she here disappears off of the screen and Simon is the one who gets the attention. Okay, second thing, wasn't it too dark for them to travel? They were just like, hey, stop and have dinner with us. Don't keep walking. It's too dark. It's not safe. And I love that about them, that when they figure it out, they're like, never mind, let's go. And they run their whole hike home because they can't wait to go tell their friends what has happened and what seems to actually be true. What a roller coaster. We love it. Third thing, it's the important thing. Why did they recognize him specifically when he broke bread? We could talk about it being for an analogy for communion, which we'll do later. But I think it's because at the beginning of Jesus's giant monologue to them about who he is and what he's doing, the crux of that conversation was about suffering. How does glory come to pass? Through suffering. Jesus breaks this bread, right? He is the bread of life. He said in John and Isaiah, there's this whole thing, why are you eating things that don't actually satisfy you? Come and eat what will satisfy. And there's this breaking of the bread. This suffering is the point. It's not the end of the story, but it's an important part of the story. Suffering is the soil that God grows new life out of. It's not that suffering is good. It's not that suffering is something that we should be excited about, like, yes, everything's getting worse. That means Jesus must be coming back soon. That's not the point. And not great eschatology. But rather, when we do see that things are dark and things are hard, the thing that we can look forward to is that is the kind of soil that Jesus likes to do new things in. That when we come to places that are doing great and they're complacent and they have everything they need, when we see Jesus speak to them in Revelation, right, he's got to do some revving to get them back on the path and back on mission. It is because of the crucifixion that we have resurrection. It's because of suffering and darkness that God is growing new light. And so it's in the breaking of that bread that everything comes together for them. So what are our three takeaways here? Number one, Jesus chooses to honor people and encounter people and show up with people who are somewhere on the spectrum between belief and unbelief, who are willing to strike off in a partnership almost on their own on the best lead that they've got. Jesus chooses to show up for folks who haven't washed their hands of everything, but who are willing to look stupid, still arguing together, still trying to figure it all out. And that's where you and I can also find Jesus. Number two is that lesson that we were just talking about. What's his lesson that he wants his people to know? He wants his people to know that that suffering is not the end of the story, but it is a part of the story. And when we encounter that suffering and darkness, we can know that we are in God's journey, in the story that he is painting. He is doing a new and beautiful thing, and he likes to do that out of compost, not out of people who have everything figured out and have everything they need already. Third takeaway, we won't find Jesus necessarily if we're looking for him in the big events, if we're looking for him in the Senate hearings or the big major world events where we would expect him to show up and like put everybody to shame. Jesus shows up on hikes. Jesus shows up in conversations with strangers. Jesus shows up in dinners that we have with old and new friends. And so that's where we can keep an eye out for him. And it's with those things in mind that we turn our hearts and minds toward communion. We have an open table at Refuge Church. So if you're interested in celebrating life, death, and resurrection of Christ, you're welcome to do so. If for whatever reason you're not interested in that or it doesn't feel right to you at this time, that's totally fine. Nobody will say anything to you about it or possibly even notice. You can do what feels right for you in this particular moment. But it's in communion that we can also find these takeaways, right? We are invited to the table as people who don't have everything on the creed checked off perfect, no questions. That's not a requirement that Jesus has for us. In fact, we always see in the text people that he comes and meets with are people who have questions, and that's part of what it means to be a Jesus follower, part of what it means to be his church. It's being able to say that we don't know everything and we don't have all the answers. Second takeaway with communion, right, is in the midst of our darkness, we're still invited to meet with Jesus in this ancient ritual. We don't have to have everything figured out before we come to him. We can come to him with our darkness and meet him at that table. And then number three, we might not find Jesus in the news, which is kind of terrible these days. I don't know if anybody's noticed. Yet we do have the opportunity to encounter him in these very strange, very old rituals of breaking bread and taking wine together, being gathered in the symbolic way at this table, this party, this feast, which this sacrament is pointing to. The end of all things is all of us in God's household together, celebrating one another, celebrating him, celebrating the world remade, or world redeemed. And so we're pointing toward that. That these are the words that I say. It's my one job. The Lord Jesus, on the night when he was betrayed, he took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, he also took the cup after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink of it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes." John and George are going to play one song, which we can sing along with. As if we choose to participate, we line up over in this room. The table's in a little bit different spot than normal. And then after we're all coming back together, we'll have another song. You're welcome to sing either or both, whatever works for you. And then I'll pray again. Go team. Oh.